oh my gosh, he has mold. It's not just candida. And both of them are very similar. Candida is unicellular, while mold is multicellular. So they behave in a very similar fashion with similar symptoms a lot of the times.
Welcome to the Healthy Skin Show with Jennifer Fugo, where we're flipping everything you've been told about your chronic skin issues upside down and connecting you with alternative solutions your dermatologist never told you about.
Welcome to episode number 74 of the Healthy Skin Show. In today's episode, we are going to be diving into the concept of when candida and fungal infections can become rather stealth and trigger really intense, awful skin issues that present in a way that can puzzle or completely baffle dermatologists. A moment ago, you heard me use the term stealth, and you may start to hear that phrase, especially paired with the word infections, come up more and more. Because what we're finding is that there are individuals out there who are so ill that typical ways of dealing with their health in general, but then also the specific symptoms that are really driving them nuts. So in our particular case, it would be skin rashes, is driven by something that's a lot more complex that a typical product you might buy online isn't going to help. And even sometimes working with a functional doctor, you may find that that doctor gets stumped. And oftentimes these types of stealth infections will stump traditional medical doctors in the conventional space. So your dermatologist will literally not have any idea what's driving the underlying issue because they weren't trained to look for bugs essentially that are hiding out in spots that, say, a regular blood lab isn't going to look for. Before we dive into this conversation today, I wanted to give a big thanks to Brooke Craven. She left a great review over on iTunes, sharing that Jennifer, host of the Healthy Skin Show, highlights all aspects of skin health, wellness, and more in this can't be missed podcast. This host and her expert guests offer insightful advice and information that's helpful to anyone with skin issues that listens. I really appreciate the time that all of you take to review and rate the Healthy Skin Show. It means a ton because I can't share this show myself. I need your help. And so every single time you make a point of sharing a show with someone you care about, or as in the case of Brooke, leaving a review, rating the podcast, it means a ton because you're passing along that potential source of hope and inspiration to somebody else who's desperately seeking it. My guest today is a doctor who has a ton of experience dealing with and treating stealth infections. And in fact, she's so popular, her Instagram account alone has over 200,000 followers. I was fortunate enough to have a colleague and friend introduce us. I invited her onto the show to talk, and she was so generous with her time. And in fact, she's even one of our speakers diving even deeper into this conversation about stealth infections in the Eczema and Psoriasis Awareness Week 2019. You'll definitely want to check out her interview. It's my pleasure, without further ado, to share with you guys my interview with Dr. Jess Peatross.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Healthy Skin Show. Today, I've got a very special guest with me who caught my eye with a very specific Instagram post that we're going to talk about in a moment that I was like, I really want to speak to this woman. I want to have her on the show for you to learn from because not only is she incredibly well known, but she's incredibly well respected amongst all of my colleagues in the functional medicine world. And so I thought, who better to talk on this topic, and especially on what we're gonna speak about today. If you don't know her, her name is Dr. Jess Peatross, and she is a visionary for the future of healthcare and a force in functional medicine. She's an expert in the field of stealth infections and infectious disease and regenerative medicine, cannabis, ozone, and environmental toxicities. Dr. Jess is a board-certified internal medicine physician who trained at the University of Louisville. During this time, she experienced what many of her patients today are suffering from: anxiety, hormonal imbalances, and adrenal dysfunction. She began to seek out real answers that led to the root cause of disease, not just for herself, but also for her patients. This led her to functional medicine with additional training in Gerson therapy, ozone, and nutrigenomics. Her philosophy now embodies true health is encompassing all that the body is, body, mind, and spirit, which is, in essence, the true definition of health. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Jess. I really appreciate it.
Ooh, that was a mouthful. Yes, thank you for having me. I'm honored. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so let's talk about this Instagram post that I saw from you, which is what really caught my attention. Your significant other had developed a really serious infection, I guess would be the correct way to describe it, that ended up really dramatically impacting his skin. So could you talk us through what exactly happened so that we could get an understanding of where he was, what he was struggling with, and maybe why doctors would have normally ignored some of these things or just not gone down those rabbit holes?
Right, exactly. So the final diagnosis for him was a bunch of stealth infections. I call them frenemies that like to jump on board, and they're really one of the root causes of disease. Even cancers and chronic diseases can be triggered from hidden stealth infections that reside hidden from the body's defenses. And so he had Clostridium, Candida, and mold. And we actually didn't rule out Lyme disease and its co-infections. So it was just biotoxin illness in general, which happens to be my specialty. So after he was diagnosed, we really went on the war path against this because it is basically a war. And I've been detoxing him now for the last year with us looking for the root cause to everything and removing everything toxic in his life. And how that affected him was basically he had a lot of brain fog. He had some static shocks on the skin, itchy, kind of restless leg type of sensations and itchy skin sensations at night, especially. He had male pattern baldness. He was thinning actually on his scalp. Even some other issues that ended up being related to even erectile dysfunction and not being able to think clearly and perform at work and have that sort of stamina throughout the day, right? So it affected every area of his life. And when you look at the U.S. in general, this is a lot of people that have similar symptoms of pain and brain fog and just generalized vague symptoms that the Western medical system isn't really equipped to diagnose because they don't have an ICD-10 code for that.
Isn't that the truth? Well, let me ask you a question about the itchy skin thing. Did he have hives or anything? Was it just itchiness on the body or anything?
Yeah, it wasn't actually hives or anything. I myself have had stuff like that in the past, some dermatography and hive-like stuff as well that can be triggered from candida, but he didn't have that. He had more like static shocks and weird crawling sensations on the skin, which honestly come a lot with a mold diagnosis and mycotoxin illness. And static shocks or feeling like something's kind of pulling the hairs on the skin, especially at night, is really indicative of that. And a lot of the parasitic infections that can hide in the body, these bugs are nocturnal. So they often move more at night. So when people are lying still, they're very aware of these really eerie body sensations and skin sensations in general.
Oh my goodness. So somebody listening to this is probably going, oh my gosh, I might be living in a body with things that I don't want to be in here. That is sort of like the definition of creepy crawly, but it's in you. So yeah. Your boyfriend was experiencing all of this, and how exactly did you even get here to figure out the candida and the infections?
I have my own line of supplements. So my flagship product was Microbiome, which is a gut and candida parasite cleanse. So I was aware of these hidden stealth infections, but what wasn't or hadn't piqued my interest yet was mold. And what ended up happening was I went to a functional diagnostics nutrition or FDN kind of summit on mold. And when I started hearing, it's like I had forgotten about mold. I had as a Western physician, we don't have training in that. And it had been so long since I'd done any sort of continuing medical education on something like that I'd forgotten many of the symptoms that were indicative of a mold infection. So when they started rattling off things and really kind of making me remember, if you will, I was like, oh my gosh, he has mold. It's not just candida. And both of them are very similar. Candida is unicellular, while mold is multicellular. So they behave in a very similar fashion with similar symptoms a lot of the times.
And so wait, with mold, I think everybody is more or less concerned about mold in their house. Like maybe they're being exposed to mold, but you're saying he had a mold infection.
So yes, so that's where he got it. He got it from a water damaged building. And so that's the thing is about 50% of what we estimate of buildings have previous water damage, and 45% have current damage, and 85% have previous damage. And there's 1 out of 4 people in the population who have a genetic predisposition to being very sensitive to mold. And if they're in a chronic exposure, they can't get rid of it even after they're out of the exposure without help. So he was one of those people. And once mold has lowered your immune system low enough, you can have other frenemies jump on board, things like candida or clostridium, which had happened to him. And then you have real problems. You start to have things, your bowel movements get messed up, you have a bloated gut. And then when you don't get things out your bowels, they come out your skin. Right? So... Yeah,
absolutely. So how exactly, if somebody is listening to you and going, oh my goodness, I used to live in this house where there was a lot of black mold and my symptoms started around then, and I have these similar experiences of nighttime symptoms. Where would they even start to figure out if they have a mold infection? Right.
So it's hard because just like I am the prime example, most doctors, this is kind of flying under the radar and being underdiagnosed. And this is a root cause problem. It's linked to Alzheimer's. It's linked to autoimmunity. I mean, it's a root cause problem of so many different issues. And so, we really, if people consider this, they should look at the list of symptoms that the other symptoms they have, things like difficulty holding the urine and being thirsty all the time, the static shocks in the skin I mentioned, being exhausted all the time, having no libido, kind of shortness of breath, recurrent sinusitis or allergies. And so a lot of that goes hand in hand with things like, eczema or even asthma as in children is looked at now as being possibility of being mold exposure, especially when children grow out of asthma, and it has to do with them moving out of the house they were in possibly. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's being missed quite a bit. And so if people are interested and those symptoms are like, wow, that sounds like me, they really need to look at someone who is a biotoxin or Lyme literate doctor. A lot of times mold runs hand in hand with Lyme. And so these doctors are equipped to look at the environment and test you through like even a urine kit, uses DNA to test for mycotoxin panels. And you can get that done for about $300. There's also blood work that can be done that's probably a little more expensive depending on what people's insurance plans look like. So.
And you also mentioned to me before we started that for your boyfriend, he had a nasal swab.
Yes.
Why did you do that and what did you find?
So the nasal swabs are a really good indicator indirectly of mold. And what they do is it stands for methicillin, multi-antibiotic resistant Staph aureus. So basically, it's a negative, coag-negative Staph aureus that lives in the nose, and they're swabbing for that. And if it's positive, and there's also a biofilm formation with that, that is very indicative that mold, and there's some sort of very looming presence there that's lowering the immune system enough for this biofilm to form for other bugs that are drug resistant to be able to form in the nose. So this is an indicator that there is some sort of mycotoxin illness present, possibly. There's also a visual contrast test that people can do for $15 at survivingmold.com, and 93% of mold patients fail that test.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So that's survivingmold.com, you said?
Yes, exactly.
Right. So that's easy for people to remember. I think, too, for those listening who have eczema, the thing that's popping up for them is staph is such a huge problem with eczema. And I've oftentimes wondered, and you're actually not the first person who's mentioned in passing the concept of using nasal swabs to look for staph, because what if you do have this chronic issue around your eyes and eczema around the nose and the mouth, and that may be a place where it's hiding essentially for some people.
Exactly.
So you figured out all this stuff for your boyfriend, and as he's going through the process of addressing this, things start coming out, so to speak.
Yes.
Because I think people think, oh, you figure out what's wrong and you get better.
No, unfortunately, the system that's in place now for medicine has made people believe this fallacy, I will say, because really healing sucks. Let's be honest. It's really hard. And it's not fun at all. And when your body sees things that it's missed or that have gone under the radar, it's really going to go into kill mode temporarily. Because, man, that pathogen that it missed is not supposed to be in your body. So it's your body that gives you the fever. It's your body that causes the rashes to push things out. It's your body that causes swelling and all that stuff to get rid of whatever it's viewing as foreign inside of it. And so really when you suppress those patterns, it's really suppressing the body's job. The body, what it's supposed to be doing. The body's intelligent. It's us that don't understand what our body needs most of the time. So I tell people, understand that whenever you start detoxing, like with my boyfriend, we started detoxing him with anti-herbals and binders. And when we first gave him anti-herbals, he had this kind of balding spot here on his head where he was thinning. He didn't know at the time, thank God. The whole time he didn't know because he couldn't see it, which probably was good for him. But when we gave him the detox, literally he started saying, my head's itching. And I started to watch him, and then I looked, and there were these cysts forming on his head where he'd done, the pumps of the herbal, and really that had wiped the biofilm away where the mold and candida were hiding. So the body's defenses go, oh, there you are. Kill, kill, kill. And so his lymph nodes had swollen up in the cervical neck. The cells were there making soldier cells, and they shot those suckers up into the sinuses to run the bugs out. And that's what was happening right before our eyes, literally. And so a lot of rashes are the body pushing out something that it's viewing as foreign or a threat somehow to the body. And many times we don't understand the pathogens that are inside of us that our body may view innately that we don't. Our body's intelligent. It doesn't really make mistakes most of the time. It's something that we're missing that the body's seeing.
That's really an interesting, and I love the perspective, actually. It's super interesting, and it's one that I think is missing in conventional dermatology, because when I went to the doctor, they'd be like, oh, well, here's another cream. Try this cream. You're just going to have to learn to live with this.
Oh, yeah. I love that one. I've heard that one so many times. Yeah.
Oh, rashes are normal. It's just a thing, probably runs in your family, as if it's just a normal experience that we all have and that we suffer with.
It's just, I hate the perspective of your genes are broken. It's your body that's not smart. That's the wrong perspective. It actually is not our genes. Our genes are changed by the environment and the exposures that we have throughout our lifetimes. And so I tell people, the environment loads the gun, your genes load the gun, the environment pulls the trigger. Mm-hmm. And so that's the same with rashes too, and everything else we're exposed to. Absolutely.
Yeah. And with your boyfriend now, just to give people a sense of how far he's come, could you share with us, he started in one spot, and to some degree, one could probably argue, as you said, it's a good thing he couldn't see what was going on in his head and experiencing all these other not very pleasant symptoms in the process.
Right.
Where is he now? Is he in a better spot now that he's been going through all of this, and how long did that take?
Oh, yeah. I tell people he reverse aged. He looks different than he used to, because when we got rid of the hidden infections that were involving his sinuses and causing so much inflammation, his hair regrew, his wrinkles went away, his skin lightened up, and he had more of a glow. He looked more like the younger version of himself than he did. So it was actually the best anti-aging plan that there ever was, to look for hidden infections and heavy metals and other environmental toxicities in his body. So he's much better. He's probably, I would say, 90 to 95% all the way. We have some cavities in his teeth, his mouth, that have been there for a while that we need to get checked out. That can also be a root source. I should just put people onto that as well. Infected root canals and teeth can also cause rashes and things in the sinus cavities too. And so that's one area that we think might be a root cause. That's the last 10% of what he needs to go. But other than that, it's been a journey, and he's taught me along the way, and he's so much better. I wish I had a before and after picture close up of him. It's amazing. It's amazing.
That's an incredible story to hear. And, it's interesting. You're so You're such an expert in this whole area of mold and the stealth infections, which I think aren't discussed enough, let alone in traditional medicine. My dad's a doctor, so I'm not knocking doctors. He's a surgeon. And, but I even think in functional medicine, we also miss that boat, so to speak, of realizing that it's not just candida. It's not just some of the more obvious things. There can be things really hidden deep underneath that you have to be able to dig for and look for. And I love that you're sharing with the audience as well this reminder that because you have rashes, that's only one tiny little fraction of the puzzle.
Yes. It's a clue. Your body's saying something to you. It's trying to talk to you. That's how our body talks. It doesn't use English words or any sort of language. So that's how it's physically speaking to you. Hey, there's something wrong. Please investigate.
And so if people are frustrated right now, they've gone to the doctor and they're at the beginning of this journey of starting to really dig, what would be one piece of advice that you would have for them if they're like, up all night, super itchy, skin's burning, they're going crazy, they're desperate, trying to get rid of the steroid cream out of their life, but they're not sure if they can let it go for their own sanity? Is there a piece of advice you might have for those listening?
Absolutely. Look for what's inside you that's not supposed to be there. And I firmly believe that disease only comes from 4 places, which is hidden infections, heavy metals, other environmental toxicities, and emotional trauma and stress. That's it. That's all that changes your genes or your ancestors' genes. And so if you can kind of reverse engineer your life to look at what you may have been exposed to, then that can often give you a clue about what's inside you that's setting your body off, causing autoimmunity, causing rashes that don't need to be there, hives, itchiness, multiple chemical sensitivities, whatever it is. And so if you look at that and you get things like a non-heavy metal tox screen, a heavy metal tox screen, something like a DNA-based stool test or a urine test for mycotoxins, and start looking for those pathogens that may be hiding there that are triggering your cells to release all this histamine, mast cells to release all these chromalin that makes you itch all over and, have blankets of just eczema. Really look, because there's something your body is telling you, hey, there's something inside me that doesn't belong here.
One last question as you were talking.
Sure.
What about the person who's saying, okay, well, I'm just going to take out more and more foods. It must be the food that's causing this.
Well, my question to them would be, why is your body rejecting what is probably good foods at this point? I understand inflammatory foods. I feel like if you have inflammatory gut issues or skin issues, you really should be not avoiding gluten, dairy, processed sugar, really inflammatory foods like that, GMO, herbicide sprayed foods. However, if you've already done that and you're starting to remove fruits and vegetables and healthy, quinoa, grains, rice, things like that, then there's something wrong. Your gut's inflamed. And at that point, it's not your body. It's still some pathogen there, some environmental toxicity there that's causing an inflamed gut. And no matter what food you put into it, you're going to make antibodies to it and be inflamed until you figure out where the root cause of the inflammation is. And it's still one of those 4 places.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. I just always like to underscore that, because I hate that people develop this fear of food and blame food, and the diet becomes this tiny little nugget of what it's
not the food. It's not the food, right? It's really the gut. It's just so inflamed. Fix your gut. Your gut.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And also, too, I just want to make sure everybody, number one, if you're on Instagram, follow Dr. Jess, everybody. She's got a great Instagram account. You will learn a ton. And then she's also got a fantastic website. Where can everybody find you?
So just drjess.com. That's drjess.com. Yep.
And yes, and you are dr.jess.md on Instagram.
Yeah.
And you have a really great gift for everybody. We're going to share a coupon code for 10% off your products in your store for everybody listening if they're interested. Thank you so much, and I hope we can have you come back sometime.
I would love to. Anytime, Jen. Thanks for having me.
I am so deeply appreciative to have someone of Dr. Jess's caliber on the show. It is amazing to me that we are able to get such well-known and well-respected guests to come here on this show and talk to you about what the heck is going on and help you put the pieces together. All of the show notes and links for today's episode can be found over at skinterrupt.com/074. And if you've got questions or comments for Dr. Jess, that's the best place to share them. You guys know the drill. As always, share this episode with someone you know and care about who could use this information. And of course, don't forget, subscribe to the podcast and then rate and review the show on your podcast platform of choice. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in the next episode.